Hello, welcome back to Become a CSS Superhero with Stylus. In this lesson, you're going to learn about the nib mixin library. In the previous lesson, we went through how you can create your own mixins to save yourself from repeating big lines of code or big blocks of code, and how you can use the mixin's ability to do a little bit of intelligent processing to create all kinds of really cool effects. And I also mentioned how you are able to then share mixins that you create with other people. And one of the best mixin libraries out there is called nib. Now, this is a library of mixins created by the same people that created Stylus itself. And in this video, you're going to learn how to use them to really easily incorporate CSS3 into your style sheets. Now, here's a little example. This is the nib documentation page. There'll be a link to this below the video. And this is an example of what you might do with nib. Now, for example, this is a linear gradient. And instead of having to write lines and lines of vendor prefixed code, you can just write this one little line of code instead. And when it's compiled, it will give you the full linear gradient code that you need to be cross-browser compatible. And we are going to take this basic little button. This has just got nothing but a red background and a border applied to it, and we are going to add some CSS3 effects to it using nib mixins. And because you're using pre-pros to compile your stylus, it's really easy for you to get going with nib. And nib is actually shipped with pre-pros, so you don't have to go and download it or do anything particularly complicated to bring it into your project. All you have to do is, through the pre-pros interface, click on the style sheet that you want to use nib in, and then just check the use nib box. And then in your actual style sheet, you just write @import nib. And that's it. You can begin using nib mixins immediately. That's all you have to do. All right, now let's start with adding a border radius, curved corners to this button to show you how nib works. Now, to use the border radius mixin, you just type border radius, and then you just tell it the radius that you want your border to be. And you'll notice that we're using our pixel to rem variable from earlier. And you'll also notice something different to the last mixin that we used. We're not actually incorporating any brackets. I could still use brackets if I wanted to, and I would get the same code at the end of the process. But Stylus also supports something called transparent mixins, which means that if I don't want to write brackets, I can just use the mixin as though it were a regular CSS property. All right, let's save and compile that and have a look at the result. There you go, lovely curved corners. As for the actual CSS that's output, you can see that you've got the vendor prefix that's required to make this CSS3 property cross-compatible between various browsers. And the properties that are used there, the vendor prefixes that are used there, rather, will depend on how widely supported the different CSS properties that you're using are from one browser to the next. Okay, next up, let's add a bit of a gradient to this button. All right, so I want to apply the gradient to my background. And all I need to do is type, again, linear gradient. And in this case, I am going to use brackets. So I want the gradient to begin at the top. I want it to be a fairly bright red at the top. And I want it to go through to a darker red all the way at the bottom. All right, let's save and compile that. And there you go, straight away we've got a really nice, beautiful, smooth gradient applied. Let's just add a couple of extra stops to that so that we've got a little bit more detail in the gradient. I'll actually just copy over the completed style rather than you having to sit here and watch me type. All right, so now we've got a full multi-stop gradient, and that gives us this nice glossy effect. All right, next up, let's add some shadow. We will start with, let's just start with a basic shadow. You see that's just given a general haze around the whole thing. And again, to look over at the CSS that we've had produced, you can see it's actually outputting quite a lot. So the gradient that's being produced is has the vendor prefixes and the correct formatting for all of these different browser platforms. And we'll keep fleshing out this shadow. You can basically just use full shadow code formatting. Multiple shadows, they made that add an extra layer of haze around the outside. Now we will also add an inset shadow. See, we've now got a little bit of darkness around the inside there. Give it some more dimension. And then just to soften that off a little, we'll add one final inset shadow. There you go. So that's got a little glow around the inside, and that's a pretty nice looking lot of CSS3, and that's all been usable with the nib mixins. We've got quite a lot of code here. Now, if you were going to do all of that manually, all by hand, that would take you a long time, and then updating it would also take you a long time. And you could also move this along even further by creating more variables for you to hold your colors and things like that, like we went over in one of the earlier videos. There are a lot of different mixins that are available for you to use in nib. These are just a few of them. Another one, for example, is a box sizing mixin that I use in pretty much every single site that I create, which is simply just using a star to select everything and entering box sizing, border box. And then that automatically gives me the correct box sizing code. Now you can get a full reference for all the different mixins that are available in nib at the docs page. Again, that will be in the link below this video. There's lots and lots of stuff that you can do with it. Just to quickly show you, this is a full list of the different types of CSS properties that you can use. So that's really, really handy. Now that's your practical intro to Mixins. You should have a pretty clear idea of how awesome they are and some of the really great things that you can do with them, be it creating your own Mixins for anything that you need or using existing Mixins. And the next section is called Practical Intro to Logic and Functions. And this is where we really start to dig into some of the most powerful elements of Stylus's ability to create more high-level functionality. So its ability to allow you to create sophisticated functionality that you write once to make all of your CSS development from that point on quicker and easier. And we're going to start by looking at things called conditionals and operators. And we're going to be using these to allow you to adjust the base font size, that is the one that's applied to the HTML element, sometimes, only if you need to. I'll see you in the video.